Are you suffering with a habit that's become destructive, or maybe you know someone whose habits are impacting you or your family?
A secret that is becoming increasingly out of control, or maybe a full-blown addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, food, social media, shopping, or pornography.
I'm Emma Heath, and this is Joe Lampshire, and today we are bringing you the Recovery Course testimonies, real people, real stories, and real transformation. Over these testimony sessions, people involved with the National Recovery Course are going to share with you their journeys out of brokenness into places of fullness and hope. The Recovery Course follows the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but as they were originally intended, a set of 12 spiritual steps where we put Christ back at the heart of recovery. We will cover one step in each of these sessions. The course recognises that our destructive habits are a consequence of pain, hurt, a broken relationship, loneliness, or an issue from childhood. The truth is we all carry pain, and it's hard to become an adult without carrying some of the baggage of life. We've spent the last sessions hearing about denial, admitting that by our own willpower we are powerless to control our addictive and compulsive behaviours, and that as a result our life has become unmanageable and out of control. Once addiction dominated my life and alcohol became my best friend. Looking back to many of my actions and decisions, I now know that they were not rational. So it was only with God's power that I have any real hope of getting out of the mess that I was in. I tried everything: detox units, counselling, changes where I lived, changing jobs, trying to learn new health habits, the list goes on. Yet I now know that asking God was the one thing that was important, and admitting that I had a problem was the best decision that I could ever have made in regards to getting free from the grips of alcoholism. We know that identification is key when addressing struggles, and what better way to bring hope than to share in people's stories of how they have been set free from the traps of addiction, compulsive behaviours, and other destructive habits.
We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. This part of person's 12-step recovery path is crucial for stepping into the spiritual element of your journey. Deciding to trust God with what has become overpowering in your life is tough, maybe frightening, embarking upon the unknown. Yet trust me, it is the best decision you will ever make. This verse from Psalm 34 helps us to see how even in our most broken times, God hears our cries. It says, "Is anyone crying for help? God is listening, ready to rescue you." And that's Psalm 34:17 from the Message. I became a Christian when I was 17 years of age. On the outside, it would have appeared to most people that everything was in order in my life. I used to train hard, I had a good job in the city and came from a good home. But the truth is I was leading a double life of wickedness and darkness that wanted to destroy me. You see, I used to be involved in the occult, which led me down a very dark path, and on one particular night tried to destroy me. I was in so much fear that I remember calling out to God, begging him to protect me from what I had got involved in. That night, in utter desperation, I asked Jesus into my heart, and I promised that if he would help me, that I would serve him all the days of my life. You may not have had my experiences, but we all need to turn to Jesus and have him Lord of our lives. So if you don't know him as Lord and Saviour, say this prayer with me, and at the end we will say amen. Dear Jesus, forgive me of my sins, as I now recognise that they separate us from you. This day I choose to surrender my life to you, and I ask that by the power of the Holy Spirit you will come into my life and start afresh a new work, that I may follow you all the days of my life and live with you in eternity. Amen.
Thank you, Joe. We know that there is hope no matter how dark things may feel. We encourage you to listen with an open heart to the testimonies each week and see how God can and will transform even the most hopeless of situations. He's done it for us, and he can do it for you. We will now hear a short testimony from a friend of ours, Steve, who is a trustee of the recovery course nationally and is passionate about seeing lives transformed just as we are.
Hello, I'm Steve Burnett. I'm one of the trustees and a group leader on the recovery course. I've been asked to share a little bit of my story with you guys. Drugs were my problem. Well, pain was my problem, really, but we'll go back to the beginning. When I was 11 years old, I remember having my first cigarette and passing out in the hedge. And that feeling was something that I chased for many, many years in many, many ways. At the age of 14, I had a very dramatic year. For a young man, I lost my favourite granddad. I lost my virginity. I had a fight and knocked a guy out and nearly killed him, put him in hospital for 3 days. I glue sniffed for the first time as well. And that really was the first time that I was actually hallucinating and using a drug that had a powerful effect on me. And I loved it. At the age of 19, I was in a car crash. I was a passenger in my friend's car, and we'd been out to the pub playing pool. I'd beaten him thoroughly on the pool table, and as we got into his souped-up Opel Manta back in 1987, he said to me, "You might beat me at pool, but you'll never beat me at driving." He drove home at ridiculous speeds, and on a bend about a mile from my house, doing 110 miles an hour, he lost control of the car, and we spun out of control, went up a grass bank, flipped over 3 times in the air, and landed on our roofs on a brick wall. My friend was killed instantly. He was thrown on top of me because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. My sister was in the back. She was literally snapped in half. She was thrown out the rear window. Spent 3 months in intensive care. Had to learn to walk again. My girlfriend broke a leg and a few fingers, and it was devastating. I came round after a few minutes with a policeman giving a camel pinch to my arm, saying, "Yeah, he's alive." They'd resuscitated me. I had quite a few different injuries, but that event really was like being hit with a baseball bat. It absolutely knocked me for 6. At 19 years old, I just was not in any way prepared for how I would feel. The guilt that I felt about the death of my friend, it wasn't logical. He was driving. He didn't have his seatbelt on. He was being an idiot. The person that died was the one that deserved to die. The 3 people that survived deserved to live. They were passengers. But it didn't stop me feeling so sad. I just could not overcome this feeling of loss and guilt. I would, for months afterwards, I would drive up to his grave every night and sit there and cry my eyes out. I just had no idea about how to deal with pain. And it was about that time that I discovered cannabis and speed, which led on to LSD and ecstasy, and I finally met a drug called cocaine. And that drug got its teeth into me. Over the following years, I experienced more sudden and sad deaths. My favourite eldest cousin hung himself, and I always wondered, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you talk to me? Now, this is a guy that I loved, absolutely adored, and he got home from work one day and hung himself. My other cousin, one of my other cousins, got killed on his motorbike. My own little brother got killed in a car crash. He was driving the same car I'd had when I was young, and he'd always wanted one. Finally got one, and driving through the lanes one Monday morning, had a head-on collision with a coach in the other way, which didn't end well. I just used drugs to hide from the pain. I didn't realise it at the time, but I was trying to not hurt, trying to feel different. And I think using cocaine is a little bit like a pool party to start with. You're in the sunshine, it's great, you're having a great time. But then you wake up one day and realise you're at the far bank of the Zambezi. It's in full flood. There's a couple of 100 crocodiles coming to eat you, and there's a 20-foot sheer mud bank in front of you. And you've got no way of getting up that bank without help from somebody else. And that's what the recovery course offers, and that's what God offers. I didn't exactly go on a recovery course. I didn't exactly decide to turn my life over to the care of God. But I did one Sunday evening after I'd been in a house where I would buy and use. I was smoking crack cocaine excessively, hugely, and I'd been there for 3 days. And as I lay on the floor with my heart palpitating and beating, I felt it stop. My own heartbeat stopped, and my vision tunneled out. And in the last seconds of my life, I cried out to God. And I said, Lord, if I honour you all of my days, will you please save me? I passed out. I came round sometime later, I don't know, and I crawled home. I didn't stop using straight away, but I think in that moment where I cried out to God and asked him to get involved, he did. He sent people to start to help me. Royal Marine Commando, who was married to a girl I worked for, decided to make it his mission to come and get me up in the mornings and take me out training. And he did it on the mornings after my biggest sessions, which wasn't enjoyable, but you can't really argue with the Royal Marine Commander. Fast forward a few years, I was able to eventually, through some help with a counsellor, stop. Turns out she was a Christian counsellor. She asked me, what would you do if Jesus was in that chair? And I wasn't sure how to answer. I was doing stuff in my own strength. In the weeks and months that followed, I saw that Jesus was after me. I kept feeling like I'd missed out, like I'd left the cooker on, or the blue lights were about to go on in the rearview mirror. But when I finally turned and faced God and conceded that, okay, you did save me, I recognise what you did, I turned my life over to you. Since then, it's no golden ticket. Life doesn't get easier. I've experienced more losses and deaths, breakups of marriage, all sorts of things. But I know that my life is in God's hands. And I know that whatever I face, He's with me. And I thank Him for the fact that I've not used since 2005. So if you guys are thinking about handing your lives over to God, I encourage you to take that leap of faith and do so, because He won't let you down. Thank you for listening.
So today I am joined by the rock legend, Robert Hart from Manfred Manns. And Robert, it's just a joy to have you with us. So
Thank you for asking.
Oh, you're so welcome. Let's dive in, and would you like to share with us some of your story?
Some of my story, yes. I'm Robert, alcoholic, drug addict, recovering. I feel blessed. It sounds really silly. I'm always grateful that I know what's up with me, you know. In alcoholism, I separate me, I sabotage me, and that's what I've done all of my life until I came into recovery, really. I started drinking when I was about 14, and my first time out, my mum let me out on the summer holidays, and I was allowed out with my 18-year-old cousin, as long as I was in by midnight. I arrived back home midday the next day with some unexplained tattoos on my arm, and which I still have to this day. It's a great reminder of my first experience of drinking. And it just took off from there, really. I was a really shy young boy, and I just found it just sort of eased the shyness, and I continued. I was signed to Leeds United as a football player when I was 15, and I lasted about 3 months because I had this obsession with music, and with music came drinking, whatever goes along with music. I did my first hospital long stay, for a month when I was 19, and I poisoned myself with alcohol. And I vowed at that point, I didn't have an AA experience or a recovery program, but I just stopped out of fear. And I did 8 years of sobriety without much going on in terms of recovery. And during that eight years, I got married, and I was a budding songwriter and stuff, and I kept sending away my demos and my music and all this stuff, and kept getting the usual rejection things until a gentleman, Chris Blackwell from Ireland Music, sent me a thing. Said, if you come to America, could you come to America and we have a position for you working for Whoopi Goldberg, the actress. And so I went to Los Angeles, and my first day in Los Angeles, somebody said to me in the hotel bar, had I ever tried cocaine? And I said, no, I hadn't, because I was a sportsman and I thought it was filthy to do drugs. I ended up doing heroin in the end, cocaine and crack, everything you can think of. But at this point, I hadn't. So I tried it, and then the first line of coke I had, I started drinking again after 8 years, and I was up and running. And for the next 28 years, I continued to batter and destroy myself, you know. And the thing was, I was with a group called Bad Company, and they were quite a successful group. And the more successful we became, it's like the more debauched we became. You know, it's really odd, you know. Instead of enjoying it, and we thought we were enjoying it, we were just party animals, basically.
And that's key, isn't it, in someone's sort of addiction journey, that there is that point where it flips and becomes dark. And,
oh man!
And you hear it in, you know, people in the pop industry and celebrities as well, so much.
It was like, you know, the devil. You know, you had God and the devil was winning. At this point, for me, it's funny. I'd always believed in God ever since I was a young boy. And this is the weirdest thing, during all my madness, I always said my prayers. I would always say my prayers. I didn't know if it was habitual, and I just was brought up doing it. But I had this sort of faith where I thought, if I wanted it, it was there. It's a really weird feeling. And in the end, the group that I was with, Bad Company, we stopped because we were all quite sick. And one of the guys went into rehab first. And I was gradually losing all my playmates because they were getting sober and I wasn't. And gradually all my playmates were moving away and would have nothing to do with me. I was unpredictable, you know. I've been shot at 3 times in my life, which is not a normal thing for a normal person to be, you know. I've been in very strange situations. I lived in Los Angeles for 5 years, and I moved to New York and moved to Nashville and wondered why the problem was still there.
That's what they say, don't they? Sort of
geographics, you know, and wherever I went, the problem went.
Yeah.
But as I say, people were getting sober and I wasn't. So my friends, so we stopped the group, and I moved back to England. My marriage had split up, obviously. You can't live a life like that. I'm thankful that my ex-wife we're good friends, and she understood I wasn't a very well man. I have 2 beautiful children, but they saw terrible things. You know, they saw their dad and all sorts of situations. Yeah, I was in a bit of a pickle, really. And I moved back to England, and I thought the only thing for me to do would be to commit suicide. So that's a good idea. But I really didn't want to commit suicide, so I had this half-hearted attempt in a car. And somebody did, a good-hearted neighbour where I was, phoned the police. And it was a really weird experience, because I'm sure one of the policemen, was in the programme or in recovery, because he sort of, I don't know, he had some empathy and some sympathy, and he said, well, we can section you, or we can, do you have anybody that you can go to? At this point, I'd sort of burnt all my bridges, even with my parents, and they'd phoned my mother, and she said, yeah, I hadn't spoken to my mother for about 10 months. And so she said, come home. 23rd of December, I always remember it. Christmas, I thought. And so I came home, I was pretty battered and bruised from this attempt on myself. And we went out shopping, Christmas shopping, on Christmas Eve. And she died. She took a bad turn and she passed away.
No.
So, I mean, it's the strangest thing, but she got to see me sober for one day, which was
Wow.
quite amazing. And I got to make amends with her. I said, I'm so sorry about my behaviour, and you know, I didn't mean it to be like this, and she passed away Christmas Eve.
You can see God all through that story, though, the way that
Unreal.
the people are positioned and you being able to make
Yeah.
those amends.
Unreal.
Wow.
And it was obviously an incredibly sad time.
Yeah.
And then I really did take off with my abusing myself, and I had this little faith. It was the strangest thing. I had this belief system that has never left me. And I don't know what it was. I would talk to God all the time, and I didn't realise it. You know, in the big book, it said God would, you know, and could if he was sought. It doesn't say God would and could if he was found, because he's not lost. I was the lost one. And
that's exactly what step 3 is about, isn't it?
It's all
Coming
about
to believe.
coming to believe, making a decision,
Yeah.
you know, to turn my life and my will over to the care of God, as I understood him. And it was quite remarkable. I never felt alone. It was really strange. Even at my lowest points, I always had somebody there. It was really odd. So I continued this mad behaviour, and then I retired when I was about 40, which was the wrong move, because I realised you have to sort of have loads of money to sort of retire, but I thought I'll retire. I got a call out of the blue from Manfred Mann, who has the band, the Earth Band, which had, and he said, we're looking for a singer, but I hear you're a bit of a handful, and I was still drinking at the time, but I sort of found this thing where I could, well, you know what it's like being an alcoholic, we're very sneaky. So I joined, and then we had a break, and I came to look after my dad, he's 92 now, but so a few years ago I came to look after him when my mother died. I thought he would need looking after. It turned out he started looking after me, and he's old, and he'd hear thuds, and that'd be me falling out of bed, and the poor man was getting driven to his wit's end, seeing his son battered all the time with alcohol. So a friend of mine, who I'd played music with in Los Angeles, had been sober 28 years, but he was working for a rehab centre. And he said, there's a place for you if you can get here to America on Friday. It was on a Wednesday. We have a place for you in rehab. So I got myself to Heathrow, and I thought I'll give it one last go, obviously, on the plane. It always makes me smile, this story, because on the plane was Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols. And as I got off the plane, he told me to behave myself. And I thought, well, if he's telling me I should be behaving myself, then I probably have a problem. And I went into my rehab, and I did 28 days, and I came out. And because I'd lived in Los Angeles, I knew my biggest fear was getting through the hall onto the plane, getting through the shops, the bars. And I managed to get through the shops and the bars, and I managed to get on the aeroplane. And I'm thinking it's 12 hours, so I worked out, quite clever, 6 hours of drinking, and I could have 6 hours of sobriety, which is never going to work, because once I start, I can't stop.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because it's been my story as well of getting sober and then drinking again. But the insanity in our mind is that we can do it, or this time will be different.
Will be different, yeah. And the insanity is that we know the result, and we still do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's where the insanity lies.
And that's where so many people don't understand, you know, people that haven't been through this don't understand that actually it's not as simple as just stopping.
No.
Because it's too powerful, isn't it?
It's too powerful, yeah. And this, for me, the next bit of this story, I'm sitting on this aeroplane and I've worked out I could drink for 6 hours. But they haven't brought the trolley service yet because we're sitting on the runway. And I think, my jacket, I have a little big book which they'd signed for me in rehab. And this is the biggest God moment for me ever. I take this book out and I read it thinking, right, until the trolley comes, I'll read it. And the man next to me put his hand on my hand and went, if you read that, you'll get well. It was like, oh. I mean, I had no clue who this man was. I thought, they've put a spy on. They've got somebody following me. Obviously, they hadn't. He was just somebody. And he didn't speak to me for the rest of the flight. Didn't say a word. Put the big book back. Didn't drink. I thought, this is odd. If there's God's looking at me right now, and He stopped me, and I get off the plane, the other end, sober. My dad and a friend had found out where the AA meetings were, and I went to AA meetings. I didn't find it easy at first. What I did, I knew I was in the right place, and I knew if I surrendered myself and my life over to a power greater than myself, because I've always believed in God, always, that it would be all right in the end. It would be all right if I just trusted in the process, which I did.
And I love what you said sort of at the beginning, that even as a youngster, you were praying. You didn't necessarily know what to, but that faith has continued.
Yeah.
And the message that sometimes you only need, like they say, faith as small as a mustard seed, you know.
Yeah.
And look what it's done in your life. You've got recovery, you're living life, you remember it, you can perform and do music and actually know what you're doing, and it's wonderful.
The rewards of sobriety are amazing. I have a little grandson, I'm allowed to babysit, I'm allowed to be on my own, and my children phone me up knowing that their dads are not going to be drunk.
Yeah.
You know, or, you know, it's lovely.
And that's the ripple effect, isn't it? The family and who we impact. But maybe to end, what encouragement would you leave for those that are watching this today?
What encouragement? For me in my life, I've been very blessed to have done a lot of things, but without doubt, I think recovery is the one. Yeah. Stick with it.
Stick with it, yeah.
Yeah, stick with it. Keep coming back. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Robert, for sharing your story with us today. I'm sure it will have encouraged many people.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for asking me. Thank you.
So I ask you today, are you ready for a challenge? To start turning your will and your life over to the care of God? We can turn our lives to God every day, yet we can hope today that somebody watching this is going to make that decision. And please do, if that is you, find someone to talk to about this if you have any questions or want to put this into action. Recovery is an action program, and we know Jesus is right there with you, just waiting for you to open the door and let Him in.
The great news is that the recovery course is being run all over the country and online. If you want to find out more, you can watch the full TBN Recovery Course series. Visit our website at www.therecoverycourse.com. You can email us at info@therecoverycourse.com or follow us at social media on screen now.
Join us next time for session 4, where we will look at the 4th step. We look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye from us both.